Hello and welcome to the King Heroes Journey podcast. My name is Beth Martins. It's July 7, 2026. I always check the date to ground myself in reality, which is going to be the topic of today's stream. Make reality great again. And shout out to Maria West, who said that in a post, and it just stuck with me like crazy. So Will Keller is coming on today. We have yet to have our first conversation, so we're going to do it with all of you for the benefit of everybody that comes on. We love interaction, so definitely come and say hello in the chat. And it looks like Will is restreaming. So let's see, without further ado, I'm going to bring Will on and introduce him. Hello and welcome, Will. So great to have you here.
Oh, it's an honor and a pleasure, Beth. Thanks for having me.
Right on. That's so good. Yeah, we've been admiring each other from afar, let's say, in these freedom spaces that have evolved so dramatically over especially the last 6 years. Now, life has changed so much. And so I'm definitely interested in unpacking that with you. But first, I'll let people know that maybe aren't familiar with your work yet, that he's a public speaker, educator, freedom advocate dedicated to teaching natural law and the principles of morality, consciousness, and human freedom. Through presentations, podcasts, and educational content, his work bridges philosophy, metaphysics, and practical action, helping people better understand the human condition, which is where we totally intersect in our work, which is so interesting. I love it when there's nuggets. I'll hear you speak and I'll go, oh, ding and ding and ding. And it's getting less and less common these days, I have to say, because the path is narrowing. Do you find that as well, your personal path in life?
Oh, absolutely. And that's a great way to put it. I look back in the beginning of my journey, which is, the journey of my higher awareness, 12 years ago. And the path was very wide. But as we kind of refine our perception of reality, that path absolutely narrows down. And especially in the last, 5 years, they're really laying it hard on the misdirection, and that main resource for the social engineers is perception itself. And even within the truth and freedom communities, right, there's so many that have kind of went astray, and I attribute a lot of that to social media. It's very easy to kind of refine yourself into a quote unquote community or bubble that reinforces certain ideologies or pathways of perception. And this topic of reality is perfect because there's so many unifying bridges that lead to this space that we are in that we call life, reality.
There you go. Beautiful. And it looks like one of your people are in the chat here. Welcome to the channels. And thank you for restreaming, by the way. Yeah, you guys are buddies. Awesome. That's really great. Yeah, so let's see. Perception is something that, it's very tempting, say, growing up and watching the evolution of observing my own perception. We all think that we're seeing what is, right? There's even no question of that as you go through your day, you don't even think, is that really what I think it is? Or say in interpersonal relationships where we're so sure so-and-so thinks this, or feels like that, or is like this, or is like that. And again, it just goes unquestioned. Or you believe something in the fake and gay natural health movement, and you just adopt it when it, in fact, goes against your what would otherwise be direct sensory perception, right? You take something, and because you have the belief that you should feel better, then you ignore and suppress all the things that don't add up with that.
Yeah.
And so this is a constant ongoing subject for me to study my own. And, I'm continually humbled where I thought something was something and it wasn't that. And I find the veils and the programming that was contorting reality and gaining greater perception. It's, like you agreed that you start to walk this little tightrope of life and reality, which is uncomfortable. And yet this is something I've heard you talk about. Maybe it's a place to begin, that this isn't, freedom. Actually, let me not even guess and put words in your mouth. But do you want to start by, let's back all the way up. So how did you get into the freedom movement in the first place or become part of that? I don't even like that phrase very much, but for lack of a better way to talk about it, what inspired you to go on this path?
Yeah, it's moving in many directions, right? um, yeah, so really, well, first, just real quick, an adage of my childhood because it has such implications on where I'm at now. I had a very strong, blessed family structure: dad, mom, stepmom, fantastic. They were really great parents. I had a great childhood. I was raised on a ranch, which added a couple really good attributes to life and to my perception. Mainly, is that I was all around nature. And even as a young child in those formative years, interacting with the forces of nature and really understanding, I didn't know it then as a kid, but looking back on it, that I had a profound respect and reverence for the authority of nature. Right? Nature just is. It is creation. It's not man made. And I love that about my childhood. I got into sports way later in like my teenage years. I was more about running around in the creek, playing with bugs and animals, etc. But what that did is it allowed me to separate all the natural from the artificial, the real from the fake. And that was a thread that I continue to lean on all the way up till now. Um, in my young youth, I was in the music industry, so it was it was an egoic process in kind of the hip hop rap community. I had no really higher awareness there. From my childhood, being raised in a very open and freedom based family, um, you know, man-made authority like government and police and military was kind of just like whatever. It was absolutely beneath creation, authority, nature itself, and that was expressed. And that was another thing that I take from my childhood that I'm grateful for, being raised in that type of space. And then it didn't take me really my higher awareness journey where I actually stopped, dropped, and looked at myself mainly, and then the world was two factions, or two aspects. One, coming out of the music industry and into my retirement because I was going to be a father. I didn't want to live that life anymore, but I also found myself in drug addiction. And that question of like, wow, how did I get here? What were the steps, or the lack of behavior, or the lack of accountability and responsibility that put me in this very difficult situation, that forced me to look into the mirror and ask myself, why do I do the things that I do? My own psychology, that inner shadow aspect, and conquering that, and then right after that, becoming a father, was really the catalyst into my journey, where I didn't just stop, looking at myself. I wanted to understand reality. I wanted to understand what was going on in the human condition, in the world. And that led me to many, many different aspects, a pretty wide, eclectic array of bodies of knowledge, primarily esoteric traditions and occultism. Which I'm kind of grateful for. That's where my path led. It kind of veered from the New Age and went straight into occultism. And I kept seeing this common thread of what I call now natural law, and many others, but this inherent universal force or principle that is in place, that are the boundary conditions of reality. And all the mystery traditions expressed this in their own kind of unique way. And then, of course, coming across giants in their own right of bodies of information, really refining that perception. So that's my journey in a nutshell. Within the last 7-ish years, I again had to go through that process of looking at myself in the mirror and saying, okay, it's one thing to talk about it, to talk to friends and family, to even go online and kind of rant. It's another thing to actually take action towards an accurate solution. So that's what I did. That moral obligation to get involved and really, become the change, as the cliche is. So that's what I've been doing the last about 7 years. moral education in a nutshell.
Wonderful. I love that. That's also good. There's a whole ton of stuff in there. And just see a few comments here that Soul said, we cannot perceive the truth or totality or cumulative truth because the information is too extensive and the connections too complicated. We can discern truth from experiential and reflective knowledge. So, yep, there's definitely some good points we're going to go into there. And Lewis said, AI will do better than MTV. Do that better. Let's see, I missed the context on that. Something we can definitely talk about AI later. Let's do that.
Sure.
It's a big part of our world right now. And Soul said, hip hop is freedom aligned as an art form, but was quickly in visceral fashion infiltrated and inverted, like everything is, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's add that to the list as well.
It's definitely a huge tactic of the social engineers.
Right. Yeah. What an awakening to realize that the greater psyop was on us, right?
Definitely.
And why would you say that is, since you're agreeing?
Well, yeah, and I'm pretty confident in this. Without that lack of first principles, without understanding those fundamental, the base level principles or dynamics of reality, you're really, to use an analogy, you're playing a game that you don't understand how it works. And through that mechanism, humanity is going to be taken advantage of. And it's really that simple, but of course there's many different aspects of it, and it gets quite complex in the tentacles of all the factions. But through ignorance and lack of knowledge of how the self works, the human mind, and natural law, the laws of nature, reality, humanity does not understand how to create change, does not understand how to what freedom is, what the human capacity is, etc. We can go down the list. But again, all of these kind of grassroots movements start up, and without those first principles locked in as the foundation, then it can easily be infiltrated and misdirected.
Yes, very well said. There was one thing in addition that came to some revelations around that. People who are looking for external authority actively want that in their life. They don't feel safe without it. They're pretty easy. Like, oh, put an injection in your body. It's safe and effective. And they're like, oh, bring it on. Faster, the better. But then there are those of us that go, poison injection for my health. I don't, and we think it through a little bit more. And there's higher energy. I talk about this in terms of archetypes. Like, so the child in us was easy to control. So those with more of a shadow child being afraid for their own survival, then it was, put your feet on those stickers, just like a child, you would tell them, right? And then there were those of us that went, nah, that's not me, and rose up into more of a rebel. And darn it, I forgot to ask you to do my archetype quiz before we talked. It's the second day in a row I've done that, but anyway, I can start to read them, and I can feel some of them already. And so they rise up more into the rebel, where they're willing to fight and maybe take action and just get up in arms, get mad about things. And that's where they've caught most of the truth and freedom movement. So it's higher energy. That's why I'm passionate about helping people in this movement in particular. And there's more force than there is in the child that's in a more victim place. And so there's more force, and there's more potential thwarting of controllers' aims, for example. And then so they need more force on us. And the propaganda, it's not simple, just like, safe and effective. That doesn't work. You have to get more sophisticated and invent spike proteins, and you have to invent, remedies and pull out, like make them take borax, because that's supposedly an age-old remedy. I'm just pulling stuff out of the hat here on the number of things that came at us that were just completely a psyop. And they go viral. Our people organically share them out, and then there's probably a certain level that's pushed. But yeah, it takes more force to keep us down, and so that's why I think the attack on us is bigger.
Well, yeah, and just to add to that, and I totally agree. Consciousness, really, in its essence, does want to move forward and expand inherently, right? So as time progresses, the awareness of collective consciousness increases. Therefore, the psyops, the intricate, plans and operations start to use more force and get heavier on kind of in humanity's awareness to kind of fracture and scatter, people's perception in general.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's there's a lot of things going on, and I think that what you kind of, to go back what you said earlier, and this reflects on my childhood. My dad always used to say, "Stop, drop, and think," which was the adage of something like an event happened, and you stop for a minute, pause, observe your emotions, keep your emotions in check, and then think critically about the situation. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because even in the truth and freedom community, there is that lack of. There's an event, and it's just go on how you feel, right? It isn't stop, drop, and think. It's something people are so quick to kind of project what they think, what they believe something is. And there's almost a anticipation of being the first to kind of form this alternative viewpoint on a situation. So I agree. There's a lot of force. It's ramping up and steadfast on the intensity of it as well.
Exactly. Yeah, the machine is rolling. Definitely. Oh man, you said so much in there. I love the stop, drop, and think. Kudos to your dad for that. And so I've been looking into the work of Gurdjieff quite a bit lately. Maybe you've heard that come up. And so there's three centers. So this would not be hard for anyone to come up with. You got your intellectual, emotional, and then what he calls instinctual or movement. You could say then the natural law, like the law of being. Although I'm going to let you define that for yourself, because I don't really speak in that language as much. And so one of the problems with those three centers, which otherwise would have no problem, they work perfectly and navigate, in exactly the way that they are designed to. But what happens is that they get mixed. And so what should be the job of the instinctual center, then we have all kinds of feelings about it and thoughts about it and beliefs about it. And you start mucking around and interfering in what otherwise, the instinctual center, more and more I'm realizing it just works perfectly by itself.
Mm-hmm.
You can assist, but having all the feelings about it, all that does is create more problems and unnecessary suffering added to it and obscuring the reality of what's going on. So yeah, it's and then in terms of beliefs, like that definitely is the child archetype domain. When they don't have the ability to think and reason, yeah, so that's a developmental thing. That's a skill, and even some people don't really get it, like you're saying. So they resort to belief and are very vulnerable to good belief stories.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. So have you bumped up and done work on that belief systems inside yourself? No doubt.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And and I totally agree with you that those centers are kind of merging and they're getting distorted in a lot of individuals where they can't recognize, fact from fiction or belief. This is an ancient and antiquity kind of tactic that even the social engineers use, right? This is the creation of monotheistic religions in dogmatic belief systems, right? To use as coercion and control itself, to separate from the fact in nature itself and how it relates to everything, ourselves included. And that distortion of the instinctual, which the instinctual I relate to as intuitive as well, right? That inherent feeling that we get that's kind of built in. But separated from the critical thinking and that logic and reason that as human beings we have that capability and that capacity, which has almost been completely forgotten in this day and age. So yeah, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, not
And
exactly encouraged to use those faculties, but to just resort to the belief. And as soon as you have a belief that you like, you're done. There's no work, right?
correct.
Yeah,
That's right. That
yeah,
was a huge part of my journey crawling out of the addiction hole, was to look at, what do I believe and why do I believe these things? Do they have any basis in reality itself, or is it just a fantasy, magical thinking that I created to latch onto as a security blanket? And I think that is definitely the process of that internal work that is ongoing itself, right? Is asking ourselves, why do we believe this? Um, because, and I've said this in the past many times, I try not to hold beliefs. I have opinions for sure, but I make it clear when, okay, this is my opinion versus this is what I have come to know, and here is the evidence for that. Um, and it's very easy to defend these beliefs that we have attached to, because usually it's attached to some type of trauma or event in our lives that we can't resolve or move past. And that leads to, egregores, understanding what egregores are, and how the dependency of belief systems create these egregores too, that can absolutely cause, dramatic harm in the psyche of many individuals.
right. Wow, I love that. I mean, not that harm is caused or anything, but just these ideas. And
Yeah.
yeah, like exactly where there's belief, there's going to be emotion to validate the belief, and then you don't have a chance, right? It doesn't matter what reality comes and hits you right in the face like a board. You're probably not going to see it. You're going to reason your way out of your perception and know that's not true. Yeah, there's so much. I'm trying to find an anchor here. You know what? I want to go back
Yeah.
and just ask you about two basic definitions so that I can see through your eyes and your perception, which is one of
Fantastic.
my favorite sports, to be able to see through people's eyes and not have to worry, like, does it agree with me or not agree with me? But I just have that intense curiosity to try to see what somebody else sees, even though it's nearly impossible. But
I
so
love that. Yeah.
good, yeah. So how would you define freedom?
Excellent. Yeah.
It's a trick question, by the way.
It's a trick question. So, freedom is the natural state and condition of a society that has aligned with objective morality.
Okay.
Right. So, and I'll expand on that. That's kind of, the simple definition. I've used, unrestricted free will expression as a definition. Freedom's one of those words that almost everyone thinks they know, but when you kind of try to unpack that, it quickly kind of crumbles, right? So, first and foremost, freedom is an effect, right? It's a manifested condition. So, what is the cause of freedom? That cause of freedom is absolutely moral understanding, responsibility, and aligning our behaviors with right and wrong. And through those actions, right, then of course systems of control, coerce, violence, and slavery cease to be created. Of course, again, responsibility, accountability is there, right, within choice itself to act accordingly. So freedom, right, the absence of slavery or the absence of systems of violence and coercion and duress, absolutely. But again, freedom is the manifested result or the condition from moral right action of the society.
Okay. Nice. I love that. So what would you say that your descriptions are good on, like in terms of the social level? And then how would you describe freedom that you know inside yourself that might be independent of your society and what's going on around you?
Yeah, no, great question, right? Because freedom it's both external, external condition, right, and internal capacity. Like it starts to get to freedom it starts internally in individuals. So one can be free internally and still be in a system of slavery,
Right.
right? You you can even be in a system of freedom, right? Or in a wealthy, abundant society and still be enslaved in the mind.
Right.
So yes, they are very intricately wrapped together, and it's important that absolutely it starts in that internal space in the mind, then it radiates outwards into the physical manifested condition, or the physical world itself. So it is very important, and this kind of is like the goal of my work, right? Is, and though I absolutely love to go into all different types of categories, and I'm very much like what you said, an observer. I'm a hardcore Pisces, so that imagination is there. I want to really just watch my horse and kind of try to imagine what it would be like through their eyes. I do that with everything as well, but a big part of my work is getting that fundamental blueprint, that foundation that is required to, number one, free ourselves individually, and thus leading, to the collective, the condition of freedom, external freedom. And this is why a big part of my work is natural law and objective morality, because that is the foundation of interactions, of existence, of an individual's life, is understanding right and wrong, understanding the condition of relationships, which is the inherent essence of life itself, right? Relationships, we're going to interact with other beings and each other. What's the condition of that? So that really is where it stems from. And in my assessment, and others, right, that ignorance and that lack of knowledge from that information is what domino affects everything else. Because if you don't understand the difference between right versus wrong, then you cannot understand truth from deception, freedom from slavery, dogma from fact, etc. So it's almost that North Star, so we can kind of course correct within ourselves. And it starts with that blueprint. And of course, that's in the mind itself.
Okay. And so what is the work for you of growing that, if you call it state of freedom, which is sort of a misnomer all by itself? But yeah,
Yes.
how does that work go for you internally more so?
Yeah. So understanding consciousness is a great place to start. I'm very much into words. So understanding the origins of a word to kind of understand that vibratory frequency. So etymology and definitions are critical for people. That's why I loved, you asked for a definition. This is so the viewers and us, we're on the same page on my definition. And sure, people can disagree with that and we can have a conversation, etc. But the process internally, start with consciousness. What is it? Consciousness is threefold, right? You have thoughts, emotions, and actions in that order itself, right? From the mind, it initiates an emotion, a frequency, a vibration, which has an effect on the whole system, and thus you make a free will choice, or you just make a choice, right? Because free will is, it's not actual, it's potential. So someone under mind control is making a choice, but did they act within their own free will capacity? That's up for question. So understanding that threefold process of consciousness itself. And that's a great starting point, right? So we've already mentioned looking at yourself and writing down. I love journaling. I think this is very useful to see and to actually have the motion of writing your belief systems, primarily your worldview, because this is what we want to get to, right? We want to get to your perception, right? How an individual thinks or believes the world functions and operates, right? And from there, then the kind of the pathway starts to open up, right? Because someone might write, well, we need government. We need these systems to produce our rights or our safety, etc., etc. But it takes an honest person to write those beliefs down and dissect that worldview and then challenge it within themselves. And this is another kind of aspect where I see a lot of people within even the truth and freedom community. I mean, absolutely, the mainstream people don't absolutely want to do that in kind of, the general population, but in the truth and freedom community, challenging themselves on their worldview itself. And through that process of dissecting and really distilling your worldview down to those core principles is where the knowledge of natural law interjects. And from those first principles of morality, now you start to have a different worldview opens up. One based in truth, nature, one based on right versus wrong, and accountability and responsibility. And now the choices, right? Awareness reveals choice when you have a more wide or a bigger aperture, let's say, right? Now more choices start to reveal themselves. And again, this comes with great, I would say, pain as well, because when you you're aware of what's going on in the world and how deep you take that, it absolutely, the veil is lifted and you see all the trauma and the slavery, all the black pill, dark aspects of reality, which I think are beneficial to a certain extent for someone to understand, because you got to have that kind of that starting point of what is going on, that accurate diagnosis of reality. Now your choices become smaller. Do I ignore? Oops, sorry, my cat just swap. Sorry.
That's it.
Do I ignore what is going on? Do I get involved? What is the solution? So different questions start to arise. And at the point where your worldview starts to have that accurate perception and you start understanding the correct diagnosis, the correct problem, and an accurate solution, now you're in a state of internal freedom. Freedom to ignore or to act. And again, internal freedom has many different levels, I would say, right? There's different aspects that free you from, we could look at it as categories of health and, resources, etc. So kind of diving into those different categories are kind of layers of the onion that help out to the aggregate of the individual's journey.
Nice. Yeah, that's a lot of nuance and different stages. You just reminded me, I did a chart of was it freedom? I think it was freedom. I do have freedom and purpose in the same category. By the way, they seem like identical to me. I can't really find a difference. And then, so at the level of the 8 archetypes that I work through, there is a different kind of freedom for each of them. Say when you get, this is the one that jumps out at me the easiest, is the rebel's form of freedom is often, being able to do what they want, having the freedom to live the life they want. Like I have a lot of that kind of freedom, but is it ultimate freedom? No. So it moves you forward. Okay, what's the next level of freedom? And it does evolve. This is something, like, people ask me this question all the time because it's part of my process. I might ask them a question: could you want your freedom more than you want to hold on to that program that's sucking the life out of you? And they might at the beginning go, well, what's freedom? And I will actually not define it for them, because I've seen it evolve so much over time that I don't want to, they'll find their place in it, what freedom is for them at that moment, and it will also evolve. And so it's just interesting to see how that's a very kind of organic concept as an idea, and then in reality, it's beyond description, it's beyond definition, it's beyond all the words. So sometimes I feel like that it's just a placeholder for all of the things that we can't describe, because they're they're just beyond our description tools of words that we have. So that's a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, I'd like
yeah,
to
go
add
ahead,
a few
please.
things because I love what you said about purpose and kind of reducing it down, right? And I agree with you for internal freedom. There's, that varies. And this is why internal purpose, individual purpose, right? Because that's very subjective for the individual, right? And it can go many different ways. But understanding the meaning of one's life and the purpose of one's life, understanding that and having that awareness, along with morality and responsibility, right? Because ultimate freedom does not abdicate someone from, of course, violating others, right? So having that understanding, that knowing, um, is kind of gives you a higher level of freedom in itself. I think most people, even the word freedom, whether it's internally or externally, they believe it is do whatever you want, right? And that is absolutely not the case whatsoever. You cannot have freedom in any state with with that abdication of accountability and responsibility, either for oneself individually or collectively.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I was bragging about how much of that kind of freedom I have. Like I really get to do whatever I want. It's very unusual. Now within the boundaries of our society, like I still obviously have obligations and I'll go to jail if I don't pay taxes and all those kind of things, right? But that relative freedom of doing what you want has actually made me more of a slave than ever. It's just, what am I slaving to? Now it's purpose, because with otherwise just doing whatever you want, it decays into apathy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right, you just become all like a blob inside, and the pain of that is excruciating to me now. I'm not a happy person in that state. So then I do have a lot of obligations, but they're all the ones that I make, right? Like
Yes.
I'm and when I want to blame somebody for my obligations, I can't find anyone. There's just nobody around. I did it all to myself. And there's freedom in that, but also what you've said over and over again, the responsibility gets higher and higher. So to me, that's you don't get freedom without responsibility, and I think that that's something I've heard you say a number of times as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. The and I always kind of, even when I talk about the meaning of life, right? There's these huge philosophical questions that most people would say are unknowable. And I think, although I never make the claim the totality of all can be known, that of course cannot happen in this physical existence, this journey that we are on. But yet there is still, some fundamental truth that we can understand and come to know and understand and implement itself. And I always say the meaning of life is freedom itself, right? Because this is what consciousness wants to do. It wants to express. And this is why the social engineers want to suppress, right? They want to hold that down. The meaning of life is freedom itself, the freedom to exercise your free will expression. And then your purpose is your soul's journey of what it's trying to accomplish. And I think this is why even the category of external freedom and slavery, the human condition, why this is so important in this day and age is because there is a hindrance, right? There is a thwarting of this natural processes and this progression for individuals and for the collective consciousness of humanity itself. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to throw that in there on kind of a larger picture of purpose and meaning.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. And so the challenging of the world view, I'd like to ask a double-sided question here. First of all, like, what is natural law to you? I know this is your whole subject. This is what you love, so I know you'll have a ready answer for that. And then what changes and shifts have you seen, observed in your own life, in your own worldview? And, are there any of those moments, because they're so poignant, right? Where you saw things a certain way. Say, this podcast is born of the evolution of my perception of men, that, right, that I really had bought into, that men were responsible for everything wrong on earth. And then that worldview just completely changed as a result of some, inner healing, and I couldn't see it that way anymore. It was different, and I couldn't even act that way anymore, and things were appearing to me very, very differently. Very different kind of relationships with men, and just my perception of them completely changed. So what are some examples of that for you in your life? Maybe it's not doesn't go along with the natural law definition question, or whichever one you want to take first is fine.
Yeah, no, they go together great.
Okay.
Let me define natural law, just because I'll use that term a lot, and we can kind of get on the same page.
Yeah.
Now, I'll use an overarching definition and then kind of a subcategory, meaning there's the definition and then what that means for humans, right? Because there absolutely is a distinction from animals, elements, minerals, plants, animals, humans. There's different levels of consciousness, and natural law affects those levels in a very unique way, differently. Natural law is the governing dynamics of reality. Simple definition.
Nice.
Non-man-made, universal, immutable, objective, eternal, made by creation. Right? So that's simple. They're the boundary conditions of reality itself. Affects everything. Now, what does that mean for human beings? Natural law is moral law. It is cause and effect for human behavior. That applies to thought, emotions, and actions itself. Now, you could even look at the word natural, meaning of, from, related to creation itself, non-man-made, and law, the actual definition, as an immutable, unchanging dynamic or condition. So even the definition for law itself is from creation. God, I don't have a problem with that. The great spirit, the all, etc. It's not man-made. Thermodynamics, gravitation, electromagnetism, the dielectric, all of these things are non-man-made, and they are laws in nature itself that we can observe, experiment with, come to know and understand at certain levels, and then act accordingly, right? So we know not to touch a ground electrical cord, or jump off a cliff, or touch a hot stove. As human beings, even as young children, we are interacting with natural law. We know, from walking to falling to not touching something hot, etc. Now, what does it mean for on the societal level and the individual level? And why do I say it is moral law? Because it is cause and effect, right? It is the boundary conditions of consequence, meaning we think a certain way, we take an action, we will absolutely experience a result. This is what is meant to be as karma itself, even though karma has been, misconveyed many times. They think, karma is instant. Karma means reaction in the Sanskrit, right? Reaction, meaning there's an action and there's a reaction. That's what karma is. And although, yes, individual karma does exist, karma itself is cumulatory. It compounds. So in my opinion, individual karma, although we can see something, patterns where we say, oh, that's individual karma, something happened through a cause. Ultimately, individual karma comes when we leave this plane and we die and we go to, to the metaverse, so to say, the afterlife. We're absolutely going to reap that individual action. What does it mean for human beings and humanity? It means that collective behavior generates a collective condition. So if individuals do not understand right versus wrong, then of course the condition in the world, in a community, in society is going to be one of slavery and violence and duress. And in the inverse, understanding right action, understanding right versus wrong, you will have the condition of freedom, kind of we touched on earlier. This was a huge game changer in my journey of awareness, and I will absolutely attribute that to Mark Passio of What on Earth is Happening. I studied occultism for about 4 years solid, and I dabbled in almost every tradition that I could get my hands on: Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, Norse mythology, even the ancient animistic traditions, Thelema, Hermeticism was a big one, Kabbalah, etc. And like I mentioned earlier, when they talk about universal law and natural law, they're talking about these boundary conditions. Mark Passio 100% simplified that on what that meant for human relations and the human condition. So in my life and in my journey, I was very much already into, metaphysics, consciousness, manifestation, the dynamics of change, etc. And morality and ethics was a big part of my childhood. My dad was always saying, do the right thing. Lying was probably like the worst thing I could do in my family, right? Because you're breaking that trust. It's unethical. But I overlooked the moral implications of how a condition, either in a community or in society or in the world, how that is generated through morality itself. The knowledge of it and the execution of it, the application of it. And that was kind of coming into natural moral law was a game changer, because now the only finger that I can point to about wanting to create change was myself, right? So I had to look at my own thoughts and behaviors, and then what am I going to do within the solution? So, and this is extremely important, because this is also that bullseye of knowledge that we need individuals to understand. We can create all the cool, natural systems that we want. We can have, cryptocurrencies, we can create alternative communities, etc. But yet we are all intricately interconnected. And if we don't understand right versus wrong, natural law, moral law, then everything falls apart from there. So it really is, that's why I call it that blueprint. The blueprint is always the first thing you do before you build something, right? Understand the dynamics of change and manifestation, natural law. And then, of course, that understanding becomes the foundation and the structure. And then you act on it and we create and build.
Interesting. And so what changes and shifts have you seen in your worldview over time? Things that you thought were like, a basic function of your reality, inside or out. And I know there's lots of obvious, like, I thought the government loved me, or those kind of things. But what were the really challenging ones that you had to fight with, or struggle with, or suffer for?
Yeah, no, that's a great. I love that question. Probably now I'm kind of in a unique situation on kind of how I was raised, because I probably only went to the hospital twice in my whole childhood. And my parents were somewhat naturalistic. But probably the last thing was the health aspect itself. Childhood vaccines, got those. But when I was 17, so coming out of high school, going into junior college, and I was very big in track and field, I got my last vaccination, unfortunately. And that actually triggered a huge autoimmune issue within my body, I have had to battle that, and it's manageable, but still I have to deal with that. But I did not know it was the allopathic system and how corrupt that is, and how even that process of quote unquote medicine, and how far removed it is from nature itself. So that was almost the last category that I looked at. And that was mainly because I thought there was some type of resolve in the allopathic system. It wasn't more about, oh, make sure, my daughter gets her vaccines. We didn't do any of that. We had a natural birth, etc. So the authority of nature was always supreme in my worldview, which blocked a lot of things. So although it was like the allopathic system, I didn't understand on how corrupt and immoral and unethical it was, I still chose natural routes, if that makes sense. You can call that, divine intervention, or just having that awareness or being aligned with nature itself led me down the path. But it was the last category where I realized, oh, wow, the allopathic system is extremely harmful and is, a major tentacle of the slave system itself. So yeah, that was probably the biggest category. And then that second, as far as coming to the understanding of natural law, was personal accountability and responsibility, right? It's very easy we need to understand, and I say we need to understand because there is a very important relationship with technology. I was extremely anti-technology before I went public into this work. I kind of had to relearn technology. I was in the music industry. I was somewhat tech savvy, but I left that behind because I was more naturalistic. Even when my daughter was, born, like we didn't even have a TV. At that point, I wanted to homestead and escape and go into the mountains and just live by myself. But having that realization after coming into the awareness of morality and natural law, of the importance to get involved, because the individual affects the whole, right? So I had to understand, I had to learn technology, right? That techno logos, and that tool to do what we're doing now, and that is to create art and to educate the population, the public, and hopefully inspire change individually within themselves.
Ding dong.
Ding dong. Package.
I apologize. Do you want to take 1 minute and talk about your website? I'll be
Sure.
right back with you. I'm so sorry.
Awesome. No worries at all. Oh, I'll introduce my kitty cat. We pretty much, my daughter and I pretty much run an animal rescue. We kind of moved here about 4 years ago. It's a very private place right next to a vineyard, and there's been just kind of wild animals that have kind of lived here, and we've taken some in and saved some and helped some out. So we have kitties, we've had chickens, etc. Anyways, my website is willkeller.com. That is the hub for all of my work itself. My main suit, I would say, is my live presentations. My keynote presentations. I have slides. I love going through a logical progression of certain topics, so I highly recommend people check those out. I have a previous video podcast with a buddy of mine, Natural Freedom League. You can get to those episodes from there. We've had a lot of fantastic guests, and all of my other endeavors. Molecular Hydrogen, Ostara is on there. The Freedom Under Natural Law Conference is on there as well. So everything's centralized at willkeller.com.
Yeah, you have a beautiful website, actually. It's really nicely organized, and you go in there and it's like, 100 subjects I'd like to learn about.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, it's really good.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah, life's work, literally.
That's right.
Yeah. So thank you.
To just summarize, because I know that was like long-winded, and that understanding of natural law led me to really one main core. And that is that I have the moral obligation to do something. And that can be twofold, because, of course, within my own life itself, to, provide a a situation with my daughter. I'm a single father. Um, Help out my community, etc., but also to the whole itself, right? That moral obligation to speak out, to influence, inspire, to create change within the world. So, and I've seen, the truth and freedom community, they kind of go, that's a mixed bag on that, right? But that was the biggest takeaway from understanding natural moral law, was that I myself as an individual have an obligation and a duty to kind of speak out and educate.
Yeah, I feel it. I couldn't get out of it. My tongue burned for, I don't know, 5 years when I was starting to just wake up to the agendas and the veils were all falling. And but I was tight-lipped still until 2020. And then all of a sudden it was just like, okay, this is,
Yeah.
the gauntlet came off, so to speak. And has there been a price that you had to pay for speaking out? There's been a cost to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's always going to be sacrifice, 100%. And yes, there actually has. I would say in my I've lost friends here and there, but I've always been a very speak my mind type of person. So although kind of my my childhood friends and family, they many of them hear me out and agree with me. So I would say even my core interpersonal relationships have remained intact. But there's things that I choose to do, right? And it was a sacrifice and a struggle to get to where I'm at now, where I'm more sustained. And that sacrifice was mainly the work that I did to sustain myself. I am a contractor. I was raised in a family business. I could have took over this family business, which would have set me up for very comfortable resources, and I opted out of that because I refused to pay tribute to the authorities, to the state, and there was all kinds of other things, license, permission slips. There was a bunch of things that I myself was not willing to do. And I said, I'm not going to go that route. So I'm going to start from scratch and build my business up from the ground up. My younger brother thought I was crazy. And he was like, man, that's going to be so tough. And everything worked out synchronistically. It was fantastic. And, I'm somewhat comfortable, but I've built this business that I'm not even on, I'm not on the records. I have great relationships with customer because they just deal with me. So there's this natural form of commerce that I've created within my business, and that was great. And yes, it was a struggle to get from that starting point to where I'm at now. And yeah, and then just being who I am in a co-parenting situation, going through the legal system on that, that was brutal. Especially everything that I speak out about is being brought to court, and so I had to kind of defend that. But to be honest, that was probably the easiest part, even though it was the most stressful part. Right, to be dragged into court, potentially losing your daughter because you're quote unquote anarchist and anti-government, etc. And the truth remained, right? I explained it in court, and it was what it was, and everything worked out perfectly.
Amazing. I'm so
Yeah.
happy for you. Yeah,
Thank
that's a
you.
project. Yeah. I know a lot of people well, I don't know a lot, but enough that have lost their children in one way or another at that juncture where one parent wanted to go with reality, the other didn't. And then, yeah, it can be literally a roll of the dice at that point. I was
Yes.
very fortunate with my son because, his dad wasn't going to force things like injections on him. He said, "Oh, it's his choice." And I went, "Oh, it's his choice, this 12-year-old. Okay, come with me. We're gonna have a talk." And I did try to indoctrinate him clearly. I'm not going to pretend I didn't do that. And then his conclusion with all of that, seeing these diametrically opposed opinions on both sides of his family, was he said to me, "I don't believe my dad and I don't believe you." And I'm like, "Good. this is good. That means you're thinking for yourself. And I'm
Fantastic.
like, my job is done. I'm good. And then he systematically did wake himself up out of an independent interest in stuff that he would go, as long as he's left to learn, he is autodidact with it. He just zeroes right in and gets everything he can find about it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. So it came through gun laws. That was his first, like, huh? This is bullshit. He's telling me, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, he's gone down crazy rabbit holes. He knows not actually way more than I do now about stuff that's sort of unspeakable here, like around, I don't know, just it. I know that stuff on the periphery. I haven't studied it, but he dove in, and it's yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's
That's
really.
such a huge category. It's one of the main aspects of my work is, conscious stewardship, parenting itself. I mean, that is
Exactly.
really that's that foundation of, of forward progress of evolution for humanity is, parents understanding a lot of these critical and vital categories. But it's even within, the truth and freedom communities. I put it this way: how you hope or wish your child is going to be within those when those teenage years kick in, it's going to be something totally different. And I've worked with a lot of people too within that aspects, either parents that are together or co-parenting, and I've seen some brutal situations, and I've seen some situations that really that goal is something what you explained with your son, right? It's activating. This is what raising a child is. You're raising that awareness within them to activate their own capacity and capabilities. And it's so much it's not as much them rattling off, oh, I know what a right is, and all of these things, non-aggression, self-defense, but do they understand it? Do they understand the meaning of it? Are they thinking for themselves critically? That is what we need to kind of strive for as a parent. And it's a beautiful journey to kind of see them uh, you know, blossom into someone, a human being.
I know it's miraculous, actually. And I'm so happy that you're doing that kind of work. It's incredibly needed. Like, what's freedom without the next generation? Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's nothing. So, yeah,
100%.
yeah, that's amazing. And what's your take on our reward punishment system as maybe as it relates to natural law?
Can you give me more context? What do you mean
Yeah,
reward?
I was having a conversation with a good
Mhm.
friend the other day who's raising a young boy with her partner. And speaking of being dishonest, the kids will experiment with lying because they're developing their morality. They don't know, and then so my friend was struggling that she felt like when the child lied that they need to be punished because otherwise it's giving them the message that they can just go and keep on lying like that. And a kind of bear came out of me in the process. I'm going to ask you first and then share more about my take on that. But I really have discovered a different path now just with one human. I can't extrapolate or say this is going to work with everybody, but it certainly did in my case. So, is reward punishment actually part of natural law, or is this what you would say man-made, which I want to also discuss that natural versus man-made. Um, yeah, like where do you think that helps people be good and moral, the reward punishment system, or does it hold them back?
Yeah, this is a great question. The reward system is definitely, man-made, in my opinion, 100%. And it can be very tricky, within. I mean, everyone's situation is different within their home life, right? Like when I talk about parenting, I'm talking about the objective principles, which are, natural law, critical thinking, that kind of parents need to know and teach their children. But for, a child that is kind of acting out and expressing themselves a certain way, a good practice, I think, is what would you do to a family member or your best friend that was lying to you, right? What would you do in that situation? And I get it that they're a younger child and there might be some slight variations, but you would absolutely communicate to that person or that child, and then you would be slightly less trusting, right? And that can be done in many ways. I think with a child, right? The parental space, right, especially in the formative years. This is why I say a stewardship, because we're entrusted with care. There is a form of, dare I say, government there within that house, right? If government means mind control to steer the mind, our job as stewards in that formative year, of course, when they kind of get into the levels of autonomy, and self-awareness, then that absolutely pulls back. And but we have to guide our children. So I could see a form of kind of reward punishment being somewhat useful in certain contexts. For instance, if my child was lying to me all the time, I'm not going to go get them a gift, right? I'm not, if they want to go somewhere, if they want to do something, I'm going to express to them, no, we're not going to do that because X, Y, and Z. That's a form of reward and punishment. But if it's chronic, there's obviously underlying psychological underpinnings there, right? Now, lying most of the time is something for attention, right? Where a parent is kind of, there might be a lack of, quality time or something that the child is making up lies, or it can be purely experimentation, right? The ego during that phase, that lying phase, is the ego kind of really coming online saying, hey, I'm going to play with reality and see what sticks. And that's where I see kind of, possibly a reward punishment system could be useful to steer towards right from wrong. Yeah. And it's tricky because I didn't have that issue with my daughter. When she was very young, there were many things that I kept telling her all the time, and I would tell her, like, I will never lie to you, which I absolutely, my integrity on that. I try to live by that. And I also told her, very young, 2, 3, 4, 5, babe, I will never lie to you, but I expect that you will never lie to me. And I kept telling her things like that. And lying is just not an issue in our relationship.
Nice. How old is she now?
She's about to turn 13 in like 7 days.
Oh, fun. Wow. Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So like, I'll just go on a soapbox for a little bit here. And I tried a little bit of the reward punishment thing early on with my son, to devastating effects on both sides. So rewarding a good behavior felt disgusting. There was something like, I want to use the word prostitute, or there's something weird about it, like the power relationship that you hold over someone to reward them. And then we become the opposite of self-motivated. We become reward motivated. It teaches us to chase external rewards and never inside ourselves have the basic reward and the healthy pride of accomplishment and of doing things that just even of their own sake, not getting a prize on the other side. And then the punishment is also devastating because and they go hand in hand. It's like you don't get the reward, which is your punishment. So the withholding of what could be something nice for them or something, special for them, or love is the most common way to use reward punishment. I would say in the most unconscious way. I will give love as a reward. I will withhold love as a punishment. And this is bullshit. This is teaching them, first of all, that you are the middleman with their own internal, maybe ultimate freedom, right? That as long as they've got you to project on, you're the rewarder, you're the punisher, you're the giver of good feelings in love, you're the withholder of the good feelings in love, then you have interloped in their consciousness. Whereas, say that this example, that the little boy did something and he felt ashamed of it, and then he lied about it. So that's how it goes, right? That's There are many different motives for lying and concealing, and this one was, that shame, the possibly the lowest human experience that you could have on a vibrational level, and it's very weaponized against us. And so the shame and the pain is, if you want to call it, the punishment for the lie. That's but unfortunately, the shame and the pain wasn't about lying. It was about the thing that he did that he felt he needed to lie about, because otherwise then he was going to, have more shame and pain around it. So lift to its own device. There was one time with my son where he did a major wrong, kind of to me, and in my world, it was a big one. And I had got so many years into the process watching the reward punishment thing fail miserably. All it did was erode our relationship. It eroded his trust in me. It made him more now this it didn't go very far, but it would make him more afraid of me. So I really flipped it around, and I put a lot of faith and trust in consciousness itself on
Yes.
this one. And then when that really major wrong happened, we talked about it. It was acknowledged. There was zero punishment. What that resulted in was his own pain was allowed to come forward.
Fantastic.
It was amazing. And we never had to look back. It was very transformational. I didn't need to add to the suffering to prevent this from happening in the future, right? It's like, oh, he's going to do it all the time. Well, he never did it again. He got the medicine that he needed to know, as you've been talking about, the right from the wrong in that situation. He saw it was wrong, and the work was done. So anyway, this is just to,
That's beautiful.
yeah, it's very hard because parents are like, oh my God, I'm going to make a monster, and he's going to be immoral, and he's going to just, be wrong all the time. But anyway, there's my
Yeah.
soapbox.
No, I love that, and I agree with so many things, so many of the points that you said, like you raising our daughter. And I'll say this first, right? I mean, because yes, I'm in a co-parenting situation, but her mother and I stayed together in the same home through the formative years, all the way to about 8, 9. For her sake, we were romantically in a relationship all the way up to the last 2 years. So when she was 6, but then we still decided to stay within the same roof in the same house together so we could get through those formative years. We didn't do the reward punishment situation either. And but of course, communication is very important, and I love what you said. I mean, natural law, right? It's its own structure, its own thing. Like lying, something my dad would say is, I'm sure a lot of parents said this. Oh, if you're lying, you're digging yourself a grave, right? Lies dig a grave, and yeah, for sure, because that's what breaking your integrity and your dishonesty to yourself. That's what it will. The effect that it will cause. It will manifest in either deterioration of yourself, your character, or you will experience that. From that point, you can transmute that into a realization or an awareness, right? Like you guys had. That's fantastic. But I think a lot of parents that I've seen and that I've interacted with and connected with, there is this fear of their child, when they grow up, they're going to, that fear of them being a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the family dynamic is so important, especially to the social engineers, right? They want to kind of mimic the societal structures within the family unit, right? So this is where a lot of the tyrannical parenting styles come from, that people use. But understanding that within that family dynamic itself, the relationship between child and mother, mother and father, child and father, etc., is the most important process. But that feeling to rush, or that anxiety to try to force your child to do something or act a certain way because of the fear that they're going to grow up to be like this, right? That's very prominent in households. And as human beings, if we were just to leave kids to be kids, I'm, like just let them grow and experience and and evolve naturally, they will be just fine.
I know.
Just fine. So
Again,
the school
yeah.
is life itself, is experience, is nature, being outside, interacting with the elements, experiencing, etc. And I've been a huge advocate for unschooling and all kinds of things. And it's just, but like for instance, homeschooling, right? It's a good example is homeschooling itself because people they homeschool. That's great. Take your children out of the education system itself, but they just copy that right within their own household itself. So it's like the social engineers know that it's very holographic, both ways, right?
Yeah.
The system of control and the system of higher awareness.
Exactly. Yeah, the work life is that way that people aspire to self-employment and entrepreneurship, and then they just go create a slave job for themselves.
That's right.
It's the same, right? It's yeah, yeah. And then back to that, the fear. I just want to use one more example with my son because I always talk about him, and is that I did wonder if he was going to become productive because all of his life I couldn't get him to do any work, never happily. And every so often he would engage and volunteer to do some work, but it was sketchy. And then so he hits a certain age. He basically became 18, and he noticed his friends were getting jobs, and he suddenly wanted to get a job, and then he suddenly got a job. The guy works sometimes 88 hours a week right now, completely voluntarily, and I mean for money for the work that he's doing, and really hard physical labor under hard physical conditions half the time. And that was a shocker to me because I couldn't get him to, do anything basic around the house and, contribute to just the function of life, which most people would have. I think a lot of parents wouldn't have tolerated that. That's partly the social engineering of the broken home too, that you can't actually lay as much law on it on that child because they always can just not be there. They can
Yes.
choose, especially at certain ages, and it's like, well, I'm just. I remember his friend. I overheard him say, "You don't have to listen to anything your mom says. You can just go to your dad's." And I'm like, "Aha! They have a system, okay." And this is part built into breaking up the family because it does become much less. Your ability to have influence on your son is reduced, or your
Absolutely.
children is reduced. Yeah, yeah. So
And
anyway,
and
I'm
does your
excited.
son love the work that he does?
No, he claims to hate it, and
Oh,
yet he's so industrious.
yeah.
And there has been some encouragement to, if you put 88 hours a week into building your own thing that you do love, oh my goodness, that could be just a skyrocket kind of an endeavor for him. So, but he's young. It's still only 19, and what I know is the more I sit back, to your point, there's already a lot of perfect potential built in. And as long as I don't interfere with it, then he will engage with it on
Yeah.
his own time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's one of my big philosophies when it comes to stewardship is self-directed learning. And especially in that young formative years where you promote that, right? A kid has an interest and you're like, okay, yeah, let's go check it out. You can help with resources and kind of facilitating those experiences, but you're instilling in the child that they purpose, right? They have a like that they want to pursue, and then they apply drive and willpower and care to that. And I think that is extremely useful and natural.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's beautiful. We can't have a conversation without really going into morality. I know it's a weird conversation, and there's all kinds of ways that it goes sideways. I know just from having looked into Mark Passio's work and then vicariously into your work, that's how I found you through him.
Hmm.
That I do have a basic agreement, and I was glad to hear him talk about that, because there's all kinds of snaky ways that people get out of that basic right and wrong. And then, it's again, it could be possibly the intellectual center really interfering in the instinctual center, that there is a natural balance. There is, harm is harm. You can't, doesn't matter how you think about it or how you justify it to some degree. Now, so I would have been in full agreement about 5 minutes ago. Having looked into the work of Gurdjieff, I'm really strongly considering this, just because he's a smart guy, not a guru, and not following him. I'm just like, wow, he's onto it in a lot of expanded ways. And so he's talking specifically about morality in one of his books. I can't remember which one, but it might be In Search of the Miraculous. And he would say morality from culture to culture will change. Say, and this is a very poignant example, that in some cultures, it would be immoral not to kill the person who harmed your brother. You go to another culture and it would be immoral to kill the person who harmed your brother. Like point blank. You'd be faced with two different kinds of moralities. So how would you reconcile that, if there's any need to do that?
Yeah, just from that example that you were given with him, and I'm not too familiar with his work, right? How I make the distinction from morality and ethics, right? Morality is the objective framework, what you cannot do. This is per the definition of morality, it's the difference between right and wrong. Naturally, we have to ask ourselves, okay, what is a right? The definition of a right is any action that does not initiate harm to another. Okay, let's explore that a little more. Then we can actually, if we look at the negative, the wrongdoings, now we can say, okay, what are the main wrongdoings that are harm, right? Murder, rape, assault, theft, trespass, and deception, right? Assault as well. So those main 7, you could ask anyone, almost anyone, hopefully nowadays, I mean, you never know. Of course, someone wouldn't like to be murdered, raped, assaulted, right? Your property stolen, etc. Those are the things that we cannot do, right? Because it's based upon the violation of our rights in itself. Ethics is something what you should or shouldn't do. And that actually is subjective and can vary, but it's still based upon objective morality, meaning it's the foundation is morality, and then ethics is on top. Ethics can vary from culture, time and place, etc., but still you cannot violate someone else's rights. That would bring it into the realm of immorality itself. So I'm not sure about his work if he goes into the more of the expansive of the actual philosophical underpinnings of morality in the natural world itself. And this is why this is such a staple in my work and someone like Mark Passio, right? Because this is the whole goal of the cultural religions, the monarchs, government, etc., is moral relativism. Getting people to believe that morality is relative and it's based on time, location, or authority. So whoever says it's this, then we can do that. Or if we all come to agree, then it is a certain way. The distinction is reality itself, artificial and the natural. Is it a man-made construct? Are we just saying because 100 people believe that it's okay to rape women, that it's okay to rape women? Or in the natural world, taking all the man-made, programming and conditioning in nature itself, is raping a woman or killing a man or stealing someone's property in their home, is that causing harm, and is that a wrongdoing? And absolutely it's a wrongdoing, and we can come to understand this on many faculties. Number one, even on the instinctual level, let's start on the base level, you could feel immorality. You could feel morality, right? When someone violates you, you can feel that on both ends. I mean, of course, someone is completely programmed and conditioned. This is where guilt comes from, or shame, right? Maybe you stole something from someone's house and later on you feel bad about that. Yeah, that's called your conscience. Your conscience is speaking to you because you violated that person. So that's one
Yeah.
faculty. Even
This
through, oh, go ahead.
just really quickly, Gurdjieff would say that's the element. It's the conscience, not morality. Conscience is the law. He would, if he was
Sure.
speaking with you, maybe he would say that. That's a big assumption on my part.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a little bit definitions, like ethics, morality, all of that kind of thing. Now, how would you define right? Because the way you were using the word was more like rights. But how would
For
you define?
morality.
Yeah, how would you define right? Not the rights that we have, but right meaning correct.
Great, great question. And just real quick, conscience, con science, right?
Hmm.
Con being with, and then sciere, science, knowledge. With knowledge, what is that knowledge? The knowledge of right and wrong. That's where the conscious comes in, right? So yes,
Right.
morality and conscious is very much interlocked,
Hmm.
100%. We
Hmm.
have as human beings, we have that capability to understand the difference between right and wrong. Um, and the your main question, it just escaped me. Oh, rights.
Not right.
Correct. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So a right, meaning yes, you are correct. Why are you correct about something? Because it is based in fact. It is based in truth. It is factual in reality. So
Hmm.
it is correct. Same thing as even an individual right, like our rights. It is based in reality. It is based in truth. It's inherent to reality. It is correct. So
Nice.
there is actually an overlapping of that as well. Same thing with a wrongdoing, right? A wrongdoing, it's false in reality, whether that is someone's being violated, or it's dogma, or it's deception, non-factual, not based in reality.
There you go.
So they overlap very well, and
I like
yeah,
it. Right on
yeah,
theme. That's awesome. Good. I
for
didn't
sure.
plan that. Yeah, yeah. And then so here's the next interesting part is that this is one of the things that I end up teaching is around people want to anticipate every possible situation in their life. Well, what about when somebody knocks on your door and then they're going to kill your daughter and then you kill them? And is this right or wrong? And so what they're looking for is policies, right? That they're looking for some standard of behavior that's going to apply across the every moment of their life and be a law. And this part, I'm curious to hear how you do it. So, I would say have no policies. That doesn't mean have no, basic guidelines of being a good person and operating out of reality in a right and correct way compared to a wrong way. But if you approach every situation, say in that case, if you let them kill your daughter so you didn't harm the man, this would be wrong, like clearly wrong, and your policy would fail, right? So, is
Yes.
there anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I get these scenarios all the time,
Right.
right? People always bring this up, and that is really the ego looking for assurances and justifications, right? It really stretching that. The railroad tracks is another one that I get all the time. And first and foremost, we need to bring that back down to reality, saying, okay, that situation isn't happening right now, and it's probably an extremely low potential that your best friend's going to be on one railroad track and 20 people you don't know is going to be on the other. Like that's
Yeah.
fantastical. That's magical thinking used almost as a form at kind of weaponized, right? Because it's fishing for some type of justification and to get out of logic and reason itself. So I usually kind of bring people back down to reality, saying, okay, that's not going to happen. That doesn't exist. But what does exist itself is having that knowing and that understanding, and realizing that we are going to be put into situations where we have to make a choice, and sometimes that choice might go against morality or ethics, right? But as long as that potential is still there, then that is good. For instance, well, here's one, because actually it doesn't go against morality itself. Someone breaks into your house, right? You have the right to eliminate that person. Because once someone violates your rights, they forfeit their right to be left unharmed. So this is where the principles of sovereignty, I like to call them, the non-aggression, self-defense, and self-ownership. So yes, we have that responsibility to act right in reality, but there is no perfection in reality for human beings, right? We might make the wrong choice. We might do something that's going to go against our conscience. The question is, what is it? What's the norm? What are you as your whole character doing often? A lot of people look for these justifications so that they can do something or make an excuse for something that is happening. We see this in government all the time. Bombed a village because they were going to bomb us first. They make these kind of justifications. Government uses it, and yeah, it's so tricky. So I think pulling people back down to reality is extremely important, because we don't need examples of, the railroad tracks or some fantastical situation when we can actually point to reality and saying, okay, there's a bunch of people that claim authority and ownership over everyone else, and they want you to pay tribute, and you have to have these certain permission slips. Is that right or wrong? Of course that's wrong, right? So we can point to certain examples. Or are you supposed to take a needlecraft to save another person? So there are real world examples that are better to be used in certain kind of talking situations, expressing morality and rights that are extremely valid. When I explain morality and I use the apophatic method and talk about, the 7 transgressions, almost everyone that I talk to agrees with that. I'm like, oh yeah, those are all wrong for sure. But yet, when I apply that to the real world and I show them what the medical system, what government is doing, what religions are doing, etc., that's when the ego comes in, especially if there's a belief attached to one of those institutions, and now they want all the justifications. Ultimately, it's an abdication of own personal responsibility, right? Because a lot of people in this day and age can't handle that they were part of something that caused harm and contributed to a system of slavery.
There you go. There you go. Beautiful. I love this. We're really on the. We can speak the same language. I knew we could. It's hard. It's rare. Let's see. The responsibility itself being such a huge topic. I just had a massive revelation on this the other day. Again, listening to Gurdjieff. I'm a one-trick pony at the moment, just with a deep dive study in this. And so he's saying that, say there's a debate about responsibility where if the person who caused someone to die was drunk and did it not out of consciousness, but out of lack of consciousness, then they pay a lesser price. Whereas the person who comes along with the intent to harm in a conscious way, which is never really conscious, but it could be more conscious, more sinister, more psychopathic or whatever, which you couldn't be more unconscious at that level, then they are considered to be more responsible. And so I'll just quickly talk about this, how there's the parallel that I was able to draw is that there's, say where time is concerned and our human life and the years that we have to evolve ourselves here, for the person who has not decided to be conscious, they have eternity ahead of them. They don't have a time limit. There's literally no limit for them. But for the person who has decided to be conscious, the clock starts. and the time is finite and the pressure's on. Right? And this is the same thing with the person who has decided to be conscious. They are responsible. And the other way around, where there's no ability to even choose consciousness, to choose that awareness, then are they responsible?
Yeah, so I would disagree with that. Someone that is, and even with like the drinking and driving, right? Like being impaired by choice, right, isn't an excuse or a justification of causing harm. And that's just, in my opinion, that's the fact of the matter. Someone chose to get inebriated or take certain type of drugs, and then they always say it's like accidental. No, your intention was to get inebriated or distorted and act in reality, and you caused harm. I think that responsibility 100% is the same as someone with an intention to do harm itself. The in nature, right? I mean, sure, we could talk about man-made systems that are more lenient for someone that does that. And that's the thing about human relations, is that even though when I say something like I'm anti-government, that does not mean that we can't develop systems of cooperation. But understanding those basic fundamental, like 7 transgressions, you already remove the majority of self-induced suffering from the world. The issue is that the actual responsibility lies on those that are sleeping, right? Those people that are completely asleep are the ones that are propagating the system.
Is
Now,
it a distinction between responsibility and blame? Because I would agree, if you put the word blame in there, I would agree. But if you put the word responsibility, to me that implies power, right? That if you have responsibility, if you take responsibility, then you are assuming power. You have power,
oh yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And that's what those people don't have.
They don't have it currently, but the potential is there,
Right.
right? Since someone, just because someone's asleep doesn't mean they don't have the capacity or the potential to awake. But still, that responsibility, that ability to respond is always there.
In potential only, though.
Correct. Yep. In potential. Absolutely. And I would say, yeah, you can look at like the military, right? I mean, the military itself, because they are in the military, they are acting immorally and they are responsible. We have to separate the principle from the personality. And this always, you know, digs up a lot of emotions from people when I say all police officers are bad human beings. If they are currently active, they are immoral. And that is because they can be the nicest people ever and donate to charities, etc., etc. But through their choice and action within that system of violation, of violence, that is what makes them immoral. So the principle always comes before the personality. So the unconscious masses that are completely asleep, right? Ignorance is bliss. No, it is not. It is immorality, 100%. And those are the ones that are actually contributing, whether, you know, beknownst to them, whether they know it or not, they are contributing to the system of slavery itself. And this is where, I mean, you look at, you know, alchemy with the great work, the magnum opus, is that work to transform the individual from base level of consciousness to higher awareness, a higher level of consciousness. That one great work is the external, is societal. It's influencing and trying to inspire those sleeping unconscious masses to look within themselves and transmute their immorality of what they support, condone, or participate in into morality and higher awareness.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Nice to, we kind of lost or I lost track of the comments in the chat, but nice to see Annie D here. Louis said to be or not to be is propaganda. That's interesting. Never thought of that. And for him, freedom is to be connected to true vibrations. And I'll be a brat and say freedom is off the map of vibrations. It's not a vibration or a frequency. Okay. And yeah, nice. Freedom is a word to describe life before Babylonian cults of greed. Interesting. Yeah. Like say back to Gurdjieff. Last thing I think I'll say, he says we're under the most amount of laws possible before we would be completely disconnected from our source. So we are heavily, back to all of your points about natural law, like we have boundaries in a big way. And you can, with this is one of the reasons I wanted to interview you, because with work, you can gain greater agency. We're not going to be free from all the laws. We're never going to be God. We're never going to, that's what the whole sovereignty movement was so sideways for that reason, because it tricked them into I'm God, I'm the sovereign, I'm going to rule over everything and everyone, and
you work for me. Yeah.
yeah. I still feel that sometimes, oh man, yeah. And we are not individuals or die. Not sure what that means. In this last comment, your first love kiss is here and belongs to the universe. Keep it simple, stupid. I don't know. Yeah. Something like that. But yeah, really, really great conversation. I'm glad to get to know you, Will. It always helps me a lot because I can look into your work, but it's until I talk to you, then I don't feel like I've got a good sense of it. So it was a really nice meeting. I hope this is the first of several to come. Let's stay in touch and keep in contact over time, and maybe our worlds will intersect again.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me on, and I could absolutely talk to you for hours and hours. So hopefully let's reconnect and do it again.
Yeah, I would like that. Lots of scratching the surface going on here. And so I'll just let you guys know, coming up Friday is my regular Breath of Fresh Air show. I don't have an exact thought about what that's going to be yet, but I'm enjoying that show a lot. It's different than the King Here's Journey podcast, and I get to just rant and have really fine-tooth kind of comb conversations with myself and my chat, very community oriented. And yeah, that's been a lot of fun. So I'll be back again Friday. And I think that's all for now. So if, by the way, the one last thing I want to let people know is we have a workshop series starting. It's called Self-Remembering with Archetypes. Self-remembering is Gurdjieff's term, by the way, that I've just glommed onto. And it's the same as freedom. It's another word for the unnameable freedom. And it will be a way of discovering with an accelerated mechanism of scene play. So the person, Mike Ellers, I'm working with, he comes from training actors and coaching in that world and directing and filmmaking. And now he's applying those skills to the self-development, to the work of self-remembering. So through the scene play, we're going to embody and enact these archetypes, not so they could be expressed, not so that we can, have this full, beautiful expression, not so we can just have loads of fun, which it really is. It's hysterically funny when improvisation happens. Nobody knows what's going to happen. But it is actually to find that inside you that is not cooperating with reality. It's not willing to see what's real. That is part of this is the big foundation for lying. We're lying to ourselves all day long. We lie about who we are. We're lying about, it's not even just the immoral side of it. It's denial. It's just not seeing. It's not real perception or clear perception. And so this is a way to access it very quickly. Because when you see yourself act and you look back and who said that? Oh my goodness. And who did that? The learning is very big. The awareness expands. And then with the tools of deprogramming, we come right away to clean that stuff up when you see it. You don't have to just sit with it, as some people will say, for weeks and months and maybe even years, but you can go up and see, okay, there's shadow of the child. There's that denial. There's that fear of betrayal. There's that reason that I keep on just having a fight with my partner instead of following my own sacred purpose. And you'll be able to discover these things quickly and have the support of partners and these resources as well. So it does start in 2 days already. If you're not already having seen it, I'm going to really quickly take Will's time to share the link in the chat, and it is, I believe, below in the notes as well. And you can come to my website. If you haven't yet done a King Hero archetype quiz, that's a great place to begin getting to know yourself. You'll discover some shadow that you hadn't seen before. I consider that fun, even though it's pain. When you see reality, right, it's always pain. You're like, oh my God, I didn't see that before. How could I have missed that? It's usually something about yourself. And then doing that work together, it becomes easier. There's support. You start to less and less entertain any kind of shame or guilt around it, because it's just the reality that wasn't seen, and now it's seen. And then what are you going to do with it? So you were wrong. Now do right. You know, it's that, it can be that simple. So so I'll leave that with everybody. Anything else that you want to share about your work? How do people best contact you? How do you like to engage with your clients?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Again, yeah, just my website, willkeller.com. And if people have questions or, clarifying questions or want to get a hold of me, just right through that website, willkeller.com. And I highly recommend people go check out the presentations.
Nice. And then, so what services do you offer also when you work with people? You're helping parents and other individuals as well?
No, I haven't turned that into any kind of services.
Okay.
It's just, kind of as it comes. And if I have the time for it, I'm absolutely willing to work with people. I love interacting with individuals. So when I do a live show, it's very kind of community based and answer questions and stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, very good. Awesome. Thank you for coming today. I appreciate it. And I look forward to future conversations as well.
Thanks, Beth. Appreciate you.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, you too, for coming in the chat today and talking with us. And we shall see you back on Friday for Beth of Fresh Air. Bye for now.